At long last, an offensive eruption by the St. Louis Cardinals as the Redbirds storm back to crush the Angels. Merely a blip, or is the St. Louis offense actually turning the corner? Coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. It is the early morning hours of Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. And for the first time in a long time, the St. Louis Cardinals have won consecutive baseball games. No, I know. Yes, very exciting. Very exciting. Everybody simmer down. Calm down. Okay. Cardinals winners of 2 in a row as they capped off that series in Milwaukee by avoiding the sweep on Sunday. Talked a little bit about that in last night's episode of B-Schaeff Daily. Yes, we did spend more time talking about the weekend at large and how maybe nobody's job was safe when it comes to the administration of this team. And we know that John Mozeliak could be looking very closely at Ollie Marmol. We talked about how the Cardinals' powers that be should maybe be looking very closely at John Mozeliak if Mo is inclined to move on from his handpicked manager once again. So we didn't spend a ton of time talking about yesterday's win, but we'll focus in on today's win at a little more length and a little more depth because it finally demonstrated by the Cardinal offense the type of offense, the type of rally-producing lineup that Ollie Marmol, Turner Ward, Cardinals fans, John Mozeliak, everybody has been waiting to see, and we got a glimpse of it tonight. Now, does it mean the Cardinals are fixed offensively all of a sudden, or is this just a blip on the radar? Maybe it's a combination of the two, where the Cardinals haven't shown the ability to do what they did tonight in very many of their games this season, and to pile up 10 runs on a woeful Angels bullpen. Like, we can be honest, this came against a pitching staff that is not of high quality. But for the Cardinals to do what they did tonight, how does it have you feeling out there in Cardinals land as they get the 10-5 win? And for the first time in 2024, the Cardinals win a game that Ryan Helsley is not forced to appear in. That's right. It was by beyond the 3 requisite runs for a save situation, thanks to the Cardinals adding on late in the 9th inning. They scored 8 runs in the 7th. It was by far their most impressive inning of the season. 2 more runs in the 9th inning allows for Ryan Helsley to take the night off as the Cardinals win it 10-5 to improve to 17-24 on the season. Angels fall to 15-27, and the Cardinals have won consecutive games for the first time since all the way back on April 26th and 27th against the New York Mets. So we'll talk tonight about the offensive eruption that occurred late in this game out in Los Angeles / Anaheim / California / United States / Northern Hemisphere, etc. I like the jokes that Chip Carey made about the name of the team on the broadcast today. We'll talk about the pitching situation as Matthew Liberatore got the start for the Cardinals. Again, it seems like the Cardinals are very reluctant to use him in this role. He didn't pitch as well this time around as he did in his first spot start. But what do we make of that spot in the rotation tonight and moving forward? We'll give a little credit to Kyle Leahy, who picked up his first major league win, and the rest of the bullpen doing its job as the Cardinals win it 10-5. Let me know right away in the comments below if you have thoughts on tonight's win, on what it could mean for the potential or maybe the lack thereof when it comes to a shakeup in the Cardinal organization. Look, it's been over a week, I think, since we really started to heat up the conversation on should Turner Ward, as the hitting coach, see his job in potential jeopardy. And then when the Cardinals did nothing and they lost 7 in a row, the conversation shifted to where if they were going to make a move, it didn't seem like firing the hitting coach would honestly be enough. That's where consternation and scrutiny of Ollie Marmol's role really has come into focus in a way that, look, I would not have predicted it when the Cardinals signed him to an extension a couple of months ago. I wouldn't have even predicted it a couple of weeks ago, as I've been pretty steadfast. I mean, listeners of the channel, viewers of the channel know that I have pretty consistently had Ollie Marmol's back when it just comes to the general conversation. And I know a lot of Cardinals fans, I see the comments, they get frustrated because they're like, well, how could you possibly say he's a good manager? Look, he's going to have to prove it. I will continue to say that he's going to have to be the one to turn this around if he's going to have any claim to that title as being a good big league manager. But I saw things from him in 2022 that I thought were high quality. The Cardinals have fallen on hard times since then. Yes, it is his job in part to bring them out of it, but I also do not want to relinquish any of the scrutiny that would be levied toward John Mozeliak, as he is the one that built this roster and handpicked Ollie Marmol in the first place for this role that he's now in. But I think less scrutiny on Ollie Marmol after a night like tonight, as the offense finally got it going. Again, managers are going to look good when their hitters do things like what the Cardinals lineup ultimately did tonight in that seventh inning, sending, what they send, like 13, 14 men to the plate in a row. They scored 8 runs. They got a legitimate, honest-to-God rally going. It wasn't just, all right, get some guys on base and maybe a bases-loaded walk, you score a run, maybe a sac fly, you score a couple. They scored 8 runs, and they did it on the heels of trailing in the game 4-0, as that was sort of the status quo for the middle innings until the Cardinals got things cooking in the 7th. Matthew Liberatore ran into trouble there in the 3rd, was able to get the Cardinals through that 3rd inning and record an out in the 4th. But 3 1/3, 4 runs allowed is not what you're hoping for from your spot starter, from any starter, and that was the case for Liberatore tonight. But you can credit Kyle Leahy's 2 2/3 scoreless, hitless, walkless innings, 3 strikeouts as well for Leahy. Stuff played really well tonight. John King was able to hold serve and come up with a big shutdown inning, because after the Cardinals scored 8 runs, King had a scoreless bottom of the 7th, an inning and 2/3. Leahy and King combined for 4 1/3 innings of scoreless, hitless, and walkless baseball, which was absolutely huge tonight. Look, we're going to make a lot of what the offense was able to do. That was obviously the driving force in this win, but the win doesn't happen if the guys that you would arguably consider as maybe your 7th and 8th guys in your bullpen, Leahy and John King, in terms of ranking them by trust factor at this point on the active roster. Nick Robertson pitched later in the game. He might be in that range as well, but I'd probably say above King and Leahy would be Robertson, who's got the 1.17 ERA, pitched in the 5-run lead, which is maybe not a situation you would have seen for Robertson when he first was called up. So, yeah, I would say Leahy and King coming into tonight, where if they're not 7th and 8th, they're among the bottom 3, kind of on that bullpen totem pole in the way that you're viewed, whether it's just by fans or by the actual organization, by Ollie Marmol, whatever. It's just King and Leahy have been reserved for those, break glass in case of emergency types of situations, or long relief or mop-up duty, you name it. Leahy and King coming through with 4 1/3 scoreless innings is a huge reason the Cardinals were able to win this game. And we always talk about the shutdown inning. After the offense does something, wouldn't it just be like a bullpen kind of going through it to have whoever comes in not be able to slam the door immediately after that big scoring rally? The Cardinals get their barrage, but the Angels don't get one back. That ends up being a critical part of the Cardinals being able to hold on here. The 8th inning, they do surrender a run, and I think Ryan Fernandez just was a little bit snake bit in coming into this game. King pitched the first couple of outs in the 8th, and then Ryan Fernandez came in and did not record an out, allowed a couple of hits and walked a batter. But I got to say, man, and try not to be too negative on a night like this where the Cardinals really did a nice job. They scored the 10 runs. Nolan Arenado got things going, in fact, with a home run, his 3rd of the season. So good to see him continuing to supply some power, which has been a more recent development. And if he can turn it up and get to that 20, 25, 30 home run mark, like we're more than used to seeing from him, then that can maybe make a difference. I mean, in the same 2-game stretch where the Cardinals are able to come up with a couple of wins, which has been a rarity, to be able to see Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt both contribute offensively in the way that we've seen over the past couple of days. If that's not the story of the Cardinals season, I really don't know what is. And Goldie did ground into an untimely double play tonight. But between the two of the games that the Cardinals won, to get a homer in each game from that duo ends up, again, like the Cardinals are going to go far if they can find those guys back toward their career norms. It's going to make a world of difference for this offense. But I did want to talk a little bit negatively because, and I'll have some scrutiny too of the situation revolving around Matthew Liberatore and what in the heck the Cardinals are even looking to do with that rotation spot. The fact that you have had a pitcher, Matthew Liberatore, start a game, pitch really well, and then you use him in relief, and then 8 days later he's back into the rotation, but not really. It's only on a truncated start. I think there's too much weirdness going on there, and we gotta maybe dig a little bit deeper into how the Cardinals should be handling that situation. But first, I want to mention, man, Dylan Carlson is a guy that just does not look right to me, and I'm primarily talking about what he's done defensively. Right now, I don't think that he's a guy that makes sense to sub into a game late and still be able to feel good about what you're going to get from him defensively. Hopefully this is just a blip on his radar, but he has looked rough in center field in my eyes, and immediately upon coming into the game tonight, takes a wrong read of a fly ball. It's always the ones that are hit kind of directly dead center that can be tough to judge as far as the depth. But Carlson went back on a ball that he needed to have come in on, and that extends the inning. That should have been the only batter that Fernandez had to face in the inning. Instead, it turns into a bit of an opportunity for L.A. to climb back into the game. Andrew Kittredge comes in and ensures that does not happen. He only faced one batter tonight, pitching for the third consecutive day, but that is something special about Andrew Kittredge, that he can go to Ollie Marmol and say, look, if you need me for an out tonight, I got you for that. And he absolutely did, striking out a key batter, I believe would have been the tying run at the time there in the bottom of the eighth inning, to ensure that no further damage was done. And then a credit to the Cardinal offense to pile on in the top of the ninth. Here's why this matters, because tonight was the first game of the year that the Cardinals won where Ryan Helsley did not pitch. And that probably would not have been the case if not for the Cardinal offense coming up with some insurance runs in the top of the ninth inning. They score on a play that really shows just how bad the Angels are and how bad they can be, and how much the Cardinals really should take advantage of them with at minimum a series win in this 3-game set. And probably you could make the argument that a sweep should be the expectation, especially after securing game one. And you do have Sonny Gray going on Tuesday night. The ground ball to the left side of the infield with the bases loaded, they come home with it, and it's a throwing error. Ball gets away from the catcher, so Arenado slides in safely, and Gorman, paying attention, heads up base running, comes around to score as well on the throw that gets away. So that makes it 10-5 instead of 8-5. If the Angels just execute there, it may still be an 8-5 game, and maybe the Cardinals are considering Ryan Helsley in that spot instead of being able to have the comfort to go to Nick Robertson in the bottom of the ninth inning instead. And again, you put the ball in play, good things can happen. That's what you find out there by Brendan Donovan, who just, it kind of fights one off, and it's not a very comfortable at bat for him, but he puts the ball in play, and the Cardinals are in a spot where they had the momentum on their side because they kept making things happen. They took the game to the Angels, and look at what can occur when you do that. It's just a testament to, how you need to be limiting strikeouts, and you need to put the ball in play, because it can allow for nights like tonight, rallies like the ones the Cardinals were able to put together. And again, I cannot stress enough, 10-5 makes a huge difference compared to 8-5. And now maybe Sonny Gray gives you 7 or 8 innings tomorrow, and suddenly Ryan Helsley might be the only guy you need to come out of the bullpen, and you rest everybody else. This is the type of behavior that winning teams exhibit. I know that the Cardinals are not a winning team just yet. They're 17-24. They have got a long way to go before they can forget about being competitive for an NL Central or a playoff berth. The Cardinals have a ways to go before they can take their manager off the hot seat. Like, for as much as I wouldn't make the decision to fire Ollie Marmol, and I know people are going to hear that and they'll have their comments about me. It is what it is. I believe that Ollie Marmol can be the guy to guide the Cardinals out of this, and I may be the only one left, but I do believe that he can. And with that being said, I can also recognize that he might not be given the opportunity if the Cardinals do not turn it around in a hurry. And I'm talking about, you got to guarantee this series win against Los Angeles, or I'm not 100% sure that Ollie Marmol is going to be managing the Cardinals on Friday. Tyler O'Neill returns to town. That would just be too perfect, right? Because we know those guys had their run in, and it ended up being that Tyler O'Neill is elsewhere, and Ollie Marmol is still here for now. And I think it could be in the Cardinals' best interest for him to be here for a long time. But that's just empty talk if the Cardinals don't win the games it shows he deserves to be. So you get a win like tonight where the bats participate, and the one thing you would say is they still didn't get anything against the starting pitcher. Soriano has been pretty solid for the Angels, but was a guy that I think there were opportunities against Jose Soriano tonight that the Cardinals, you take 3 walks, you don't get very many hits, guys throwing 100, I get that. Did a nice enough job to be able to work some walks to get him out of the game and to put him in a difficult situation where he's only going 5 1/3, can't get deeper into the contest. But he only threw 83 pitches, so really that was just a decision where Cardinals had, I think it was the bases loaded with 1 out, and that was when Paul Goldschmidt had the double play. So credit to the Cardinals for at least working him out of the game early enough, but they got to be able to start getting something done against starting pitchers. And that is where, to me, it's an interesting spot to be in, because that's what the hitting coach should be doing. you should be able to come up with game plans of how you are going to approach an opposing starter to get damage against him. And I think the Cardinals are in an interesting spot right now because week to 10 days ago, I would have said, look, if you're going to make a move to fire Turner Ward, I don't know that it's for sure his fault that the offense is struggling right now. But, and I say right now, the offense has been struggling all season long. Up until really today, you can look at the totality of the year, and it's just not been good for the St. Louis Cardinals. But could I have said for sure, oh, it's Turner Ward's fault? Well, maybe, maybe not. I think it's too vague of a thing to be definitive about. But certainly it is incumbent upon folks in the role that Turner Ward is in to be able to be a catalyst toward turning things around. And one area where the Cardinals have really, really struggled is against opposing starting pitchers lately. It just seems like they have not been able to have a good game plan, or at least a game plan that they have been able to execute when the other team has their starter in the game. And tonight was another example of that. For as much as I do think it makes sense for us to talk about all the positives from this game, it also needs to be said that the Cardinals' struggles against opposing starters continues. And you heard, if you were watching the Bally Sports postgame show with Nolan Arenado, basically saying, yeah, it feels like we've had to come from behind is the only way that we're winning games lately. And that kind of has been the case. There have been a number of times where the Cardinals they may end up with a decent run total in the game, but largely it's coming against the bullpen. And they have not been able to do that consistently against opposing starters. So I think it's an interesting spot that a week to 10 days ago, as I was alluding to, I might have said, look, if you fire the hitting coach, if you make a move on that front, I'm not going to have an argument against it because I could see the belief that could be necessary based on what we're seeing offensively. But then you go and lose 7 in a row, and you don't make a move, you don't make a move, you don't make a move. And then suddenly everybody's talking about Ollie Marmol's job in a way that's the cacophony of voices and noise that's out there. It gets to be overbearing. It's overwhelming. And then you hear John Mozeliak Sunday morning on KMOX basically not put any rest to those rumors. Said, the accountability starts with me, but he also said at some point there needs to be performance angle to this. And if there's not, I think John Mozeliak would be ready to pull the trigger on the manager. It's almost as though things got so bad so quick that firing the hitting coach would feel like an empty gesture. When I don't really know if that's the case, and it's not that I have it in my belief system that Turner Ward is a bad coach. We haven't seen a lot from him in terms of his ability to fix an offense that's ailing, and I would plug it to him a little bit more than I would Ollie Marmol, just specific to if guys aren't taking the right approach, and we're talking about the opposing starting pitcher that's just able to kind of freewheel through 5 innings on a nightly basis against this team, that's maybe something I would think would indicate that the hitting coach is not performing up to par. But if it gets so bad that the hitting coach just feels like not a big enough fish to fry, then to me that is an organizational failure. If ultimately you decide to fire the manager when maybe you could have gotten away with better performance by shaking up the hitting staff, the coaching staff on the hitting side. Now, it's not to say that Turner Ward's going to lose his job or should either, but there should certainly be a ton of scrutiny on that group simply because of the overall lack of offensive performance is one thing. But I also do think specific to what they've done against opposing starters, that is a concern because those are the things that you could be ideally instilling in terms of game plan and recognition of what the other starter is going to try to do to your lineup and what's the quickest way that you can get him out of the game. The Cardinals eventually did get Soriano out of the game on Monday, and once they did, it was just like a free-for-all against the bullpen. Angels do not have a good bullpen, as I mentioned, and overall in the season, you look at the numbers after tonight, they rank 29th out of 30 MLB teams in reliever ERA at 5.23. So, yeah, it's not a good bullpen. For those curious, the Cardinals are sitting in 13th in baseball at 3.91. So top half, but not quite as good as they had been previously. But specific to the work that the Cardinal offense has done, I tried to sort it via starting pitcher versus what they do against relief pitchers, and I wasn't able to track that down. But on FanGraphs, I was able to sort through and see that the Cardinals in innings 1 through 5 this season rank 29th in batting average and 29th in OPS in baseball. But in innings 6, 7, 8, 9, and extra innings included, the Cardinals improve. They rank 19th in batting average at 229, which is still not great, but is closer to middle of the pack. And OPS is not as vast of an improvement, 24th, but that's still a jump from 29th in what they do at the beginning of games. So they have been better against, in the innings, I should say, that typically are staffed by relief pitchers or when starting pitchers tend to wear down. The Cardinals have been sort of rolling over, though, in innings 1 through 5, and tonight that was the case once again. They have to find a way to get to starters and get to them in a way that's meaningful, because they've had success against the other team's bullpens typically, and you're going to see more of the other team's bullpens if you're able to get the starter out of the game early, or if you're able to force the starter to give up some base runners and some runs, ideally, which is going to give your team a better chance to win, and you won't have to do as much against the bullpen. So that's still the thing to me that I would say Turner Ward should have on his plate is, all right, what's the game plan for the specific starter that you're facing that day, and can you turn it into something? The answer today was no, but the Cardinals were able to do such a great job in the 7th inning that it didn't end up really mattering. They win at 10-5. Matt Carpenter sparking the team a little bit offensively with what he's doing out of the leadoff spot. Only went 1 for 5 today, so just one base hit, but it was the 2-run RBI hit that occurred as part of that big 7th inning. He also drew a walk in the game. Lars Nootbaar batting up in the top of the order still, goes 0 for 3, but a couple of walks, has his OPS still in a decent spot, or at least trying to get back toward respectability at 654. Goldschmidt 1 for 4, but did get hit by a pitch in a spot that, man, I think he takes that 100 times out of 100 right now, as he was able to help the Cardinals in that rally in the 7th inning. That was a spot where you go, oh, please no double play. Please don't stop the rally here, with the way the goalie has just really not been consistently seeing it great. Now, I understand yesterday he had a nice day on Sunday, had the home run, was part of the reason the Cardinals won that game. But, man, was not a bad time for him to get hit by a pitch, because everybody else kept the line moving. Good to see Nolan Gorman. He did have a couple of strikeouts in this game, and the Cardinals as a team had 9, so not like they had a massive improvement in that regard. But Gorman goes 2 for 4, had a couple of base hits in the game, also drew a bases-loaded walk that I thought was really interesting. I believe that was after Ollie Marmol came out to argue, and at the time we didn't really know what he was arguing about, but former Cardinal Luis Garcia was on the mound, and ultimately the broadcast revealed that they were wondering if Zach Neto, the shortstop, I believe he was tonight for the Angels, had his feet on the outfield grass instead of the infield dirt, where we know the new shift rules in MLB, you're not supposed to be able to do that. So I'm intrigued. That's interesting, because that's a conversation that at Busch I can recall seeing in the press box at times this year. And last year, of course, the shift ban was a thing too. Seeing opposing shortstops in interesting spots and wondering, is that even legal? Could they really be in that spot? And I think the way that it works is you're not necessarily going to see it called out unless it comes into fruition that it impacts the play. So if a shortstop doesn't field a ball, but he wasn't legally stationed, then my understanding is that that's just going to continue. The play's going to go. But if he's in a spot where he fields the ball, the umpires are at least supposed to then say illegal play. The shortstop or whoever is the offender was not in a legal fielding position when the pitch was delivered. And then, whatever happens, I guess it's just a free base and there's no out recorded. I think it's only, though, that it comes up after a play takes place, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about this. Check me if I'm wrong in the YouTube comments. Just let me know. But it's interesting that Ollie Marmol comes out in a full count situation, or it was at least a 3-ball spot to Nolan Gorman when that took place. And it was very intriguing because Luis Garcia had some command issues coming on in relief and walked a couple of batters while only recording 2 outs and giving up a hit as well. So he walked 40% of the batters he faced and gave up a hit to another one. That was a spot where I don't know how much Ollie Marmol really, what's the benefit of calling that out ahead of time if nothing actually is going to happen until the fielder actually fields the baseball, which would benefit your team anyway. But I wonder if in part Ollie Marmol's going, this guy is on the ropes. This is a guy we've had on our team before, right? Luis Garcia was a Cardinal pitcher once upon a time. Now, Ollie was not the manager when that was the case, and I'd have to go back and look to see if he had really any familiarity with Luis Garcia, if he was the bench coach for Mike Schilt at the time. But regardless, a situation where you maybe just understand that it might make sense for you to go out there and hang Luis Garcia out to dry. Like, you basically ice the kicker by icing the pitcher. And what's interesting is that Ollie Marmol maybe wasn't wrong, right? Like, he could go and say, well, look, the shortstop is not where he's supposed to be. And the umpires, I imagine, and I don't know if this was asked, I don't recall it being asked about postgame, at least in the segment that was aired on Bally Sports Midwest. And to date, I don't know if Bally has put Ollie's postgame on Twitter. I don't believe they ever did. But nevertheless, I'm kind of wondering if it wasn't a case where Ollie Marmol's like, look, it's a 3-ball count to Nolan Gorman. We've got the bases loaded. All we really need in this situation, we got a 1-run lead. We're trying to make it more, is a walk. A walk will do the trick. And so it was a 3-1 count now that I've looked it up. But if you're Ollie Marmol in that spot, you're going, we don't need a big hit here necessarily. It'd be nice, but we just need a base runner because a base runner means a run with the bases loaded, 3-1 count. He goes out there, has a conversation with the umpires. The umpires probably tell him, well, look, that doesn't, it's not like it's a balk. It's not like it's a free base or anything like that. It only comes into effect if the fielder actually fields the ball. And again, my whole premise is based on that being the case, and I believe that it is. And if that's true, umpires go and then talk to Ron Washington, the Angels manager, probably say, hey, look, man, this is what this conversation was about. You were probably wondering because it stalled this inning in the middle of your pitcher, being about to deliver another pitch. So you have a right to know what that is. He's worried about your shortstop. And look, to my eye, he might have been in the wrong spot too. But as you know, that doesn't come into play unless he fields the ball. Just keep an eye on it. But by then, the damage maybe was done. Luis Garcia's been sitting there 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and now he's got to deliver a 3-1 pitch. And he was either you're too fine with it, and Nolan Gorman hits it a long, long way, or you're trying to paint a little bit too carefully, and it ends up being ball 4. And that was the case. I thought that was a very interesting moment in the game that, like I said, I feel like maybe was a bit of gamesmanship by Ollie Marmol. And I know the comments are going to be quick to say, well, of course, here's Brenden Schaeffer trying to give Ollie credit for something that's completely mundane. But let me know in the comments if you agree, if you thought that might have been a move by Ollie Marmol. Because, again, the rule is if Zach Neto fields a ball and he's found to be on the wrong side, the Cardinals are going to get the benefit of that, assuming that you trust umpires, which may be another conversation entirely. But the Cardinals should be getting the benefit of that. The umpires, it's their job to notice that and then to say, no, this is a null and void play. The Cardinals get whatever benefit comes from a shift violation, essentially. But maybe that's not what he was angling for. Ollie Marmol was just angling to come out and have a conversation, and I thought he handled it really well. I thought it provided maybe more time for Luis Garcia to think about it, and ultimately it panned out. Now, is that why the Cardinals won the game? It's not what I'm saying. Everybody just relax. I'm not trying to give undue credit. I just thought in the moment, I thought, that's interesting because I didn't know what it was. At first, I would have assumed he was worried about Luis Garcia coming set in a certain way, fidgeting in his pitching motion, maybe was looking for a balk call. But when I find out that it was actually pertaining to the shortstop not being positioned correctly, I think it only further reinforces my belief that Ollie was just going for some gamesmanship there. So if you've got another angle on that play, Cardinals fans, because we do know you guys are the best fans in baseball, let me know if there's something that I'm missing and maybe not diagnosing that moment properly. But if you remember it from the game, I thought it was kind of a big spot where Gorman draws the walk, Cardinals go up 6-4, and then that extends to allow for the moment for Ivan Herrera to get the base knock to score a couple more runs. 8-4 was the score after that inning, and the Cardinals end up winning the game 10-5. We have talked a lot about the offense tonight and how, again, I think they need to do it against the opposing starter a little bit earlier in the game. But we do credit the Cardinals for being able to come up with the rally that they had tonight. We have not seen anything like that, where the Cardinals bring 12, 13, 14 men to the plate, whatever it was. That has been a long time coming. Tomorrow, we'll see if the Cardinals are able to do anything against Reed Detmers, who is a talented young left-handed starter for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of North America of the Northern Hemisphere. He's got a 4.96 ERA, though, and some good strikeout numbers, 49 Ks in 45 innings. So Turner Ward's job is to get those guys ready to hit against Reed Detmers tomorrow. That's point blank what needs to happen as the bats will look to try and back Sonny Gray. But I wanted to spend some time, now that we've really diagnosed and talked as much as I care to do so about the offense from Monday night's game, I want to talk about the starting pitching and sort of the way the Cardinals are handling this spot in the rotation. We know that Steven Matz is out right now. Looks like he had somewhat of a setback where he's not going to be returning as quickly as originally hoped. Matthew Liberatore ends up being the answer for the second time that we've seen that spot come up since Matz went on the injured list. And the first time went great. 50 pitches by Matthew Liberatore a week and a half ago or whatever it was. And Kyle Leahy came in much like he did tonight and was able to get you some scoreless frames. I think between the two of them that first time, in that game against, I want to say that was the White Sox, and that game was back on May 5th. Saw some good things out of Matthew Liberatore in that game. 3 2/3, 1 earned run, 5 strikeouts, didn't walk anybody. He was efficient. And then he goes back into the bullpen, kind of, sort of. He throws a third of an inning and got lit up a little bit by Milwaukee on May 10th. And then it's less than 5 days later, you're going, all right, it's you again, Libby. You're going to be right back out there, even though we're kind of messing with your schedule once again. You're going to start against the Angels. I wish the Cardinals would just commit to what they were going to do with Matthew Liberatore. And if the answer is start him, that's fine. The way you handle that is to start him every 5 days. And I get that they wanted to delay the spot again because that previous game was going to come up against Milwaukee. And Milwaukee is a team that you wanted to try to put your best foot forward against. And with the off days, you were able to move up, or the rain delay, the rain out that happened, I think it was against the Mets, allowed you to reset that rotation all the bit more. And so the Cardinals did what they did. I just don't like it. They've done this with Matthew Liberatore ever since he got to the big leagues. This is not the first time that they have yanked him around like this. And then you wonder why the guy is not able to be consistent in the role as a starting pitcher. And again, maybe he should just be better than allowing himself to succumb to that, to the different roles and to the herky-jerky nature of how he's been used throughout his career. But it's happened enough times where I'm like, are we ever going to see a consistent role for Matthew Liberatore if they want to make him a starter? He just gets to be that every 5th day. You can look back even last year when we cite these numbers all the time about how his numbers as a starter aren't as good, but it's something that the Cardinals did as well at times last season, where he came in May, came up, he started a game, and then 4 days later they used him in a bullpen role against the Dodgers. And then they started him again 4 or 5 days after that. And it's something that I can recall. I'm going to go all the way back into the game logs to 2022 when Liberatore made his major league debut that season. It felt kind of similar, where the Cardinals would be using him to spot start, but it was like he just was not very consistently getting, you have a start, 5 days later you start again, that routine that I feel like can be beneficial to a starting pitcher. It sounds maybe like making excuses for Liberatore, but it's just really voicing some frustration at the way that he's been used. I mean, you traded Arozarena to get this guy. You wanted him to be an option for you in the rotation. That's why you went out and got him in the first place. A left-handed starter who throws mid-90s and can be a hopeful workhorse for you down the road. It's not materialized to this point, but I really think the Cardinals are not doing themselves any favors with the way that they have managed Matthew Liberatore, not only this year, but going back to the beginning of his career as a big leaguer. It's just a little bit off for me each and every time. And this time is no different. When you have him start on May the 5th and then say, all right, we're going to use him a little bit in the bullpen, and then he's going to be a starter again, but the pitch count's not really going to be elevated, even though it did end up, he threw 60-some-odd pitches tonight. It just felt like he was the last resort option for something the Cardinals should not have been surprised was going to come about again. You couldn't have possibly thought that Steven Matz was just going to be back and have hardly any layoff when he was pitching poorly because of an injury. 60 pitches ended up being the amount for Liberatore tonight. The Cardinals need to make a decision, is what I'm going to say. Libby didn't pitch that well tonight, had a couple of walks, got hit around a little bit, and gave up the home run as well. But they need to make a decision and stick with it within the context of whether it's this season or at least just for a stretch. It's okay to want to take a guy who's been in the bullpen and then move him back to the rotation, but they need to pick one for the time that the duration that we're talking about. If they want to move him to the bullpen, that's fine. If later on this year they decide move him to the rotation, I think that's fine too. Just let him do that role for a little bit if you're going to make that choice. And it almost feels like he was the last resort for a situation that they should not have been surprised by. It was 8 days, 9 days. I guess it was 8, the 5th to the 13th, but you're talking about 9 available days for a game to have been played during that stretch if he pitches on the 8th and then the 13th, because it's inclusive in the date that we're talking about. Anyway, to do it that way and to not know until just a few days before that Liberatore is going to be your option is an indictment on the organization, for one, because of the way they're handling a young player who's still just 24. But it's also an indictment from the perspective of, like, how do you not have a better option than a guy who you keep trying to thrust back into the bullpen. If he's so important in the bullpen, which I don't agree with the logic, a good starter is always going to be more valuable to a team than a good reliever, almost no matter what the role is. He could be the damn closer, and it would still be true. And he's not the closer. He's not even the top lefty out of your bullpen. Romero is. So I'm kind of tired of hearing about, well, the Cardinals really got to figure out what they're going to do because Libby is so important in that bullpen role. It's not that he's not important, but the second lefty is not nearly as valuable to a bullpen or what the bullpen role is to the team as having a fifth starter who can go out there and throw 5 or 6 innings and be competitive every fifth day. It's like the Cardinals are getting it backwards. They're putting the cart before the horse, saying, well, how do we can't possibly move Liberatore or commit to moving him back to the rotation because, well, what are we going to do about that second lefty? How about who cares? It's not as important of a role. So this backwards thinking is just kind of mind-boggling at this point. And for the Cardinals to be so reluctant to just say, hey, we're going to let Libby go every fifth day for a little while, to where now the guy's on pins and needles because he's wanted to be a starter. He's getting an opportunity and he does well. And then you move him back to the bullpen. And then you're surprised when he goes on essentially short rest. And I understand that you can put a guy who is on an every fifth day schedule and have him throw in a game because technically he's going to throw a side session or a bullpen session in the middle of that anyway. But that's not really how you see it done, especially not if you're trying to be careful and manage a young player and manage him efficiently and effectively. It's bogus to me. Don't store him for the bullpen and say he can throw in the middle of his days that he starts because he's got a rubber arm. I'm sure he does, but that's not the way to get the most out of a guy mentality-wise. Like, they've used him a ton. They've warmed him up. They've been willing to warm him up on days that he never comes in because they just think he bounces back quickly. That's a belief by the staff, and I'm sure they're right. But I think when you're talking about the differential between guy's going to be a reliever versus he's going to be in the rotation, you need to pick a lane and allow him to fulfill that lane with the expectations known in advance. They continue to jack him around, and I think it's a mistake. I don't mind the idea that 5 days from now, Matthew Liberatore could be making a start for the Cardinals, and I almost just wish they would announce it tomorrow, announce it on Tuesday before the game, and say, we're going to run with Libby for a little while because Steven Matz is not ready yet. The fact that you're continuing to be reluctant to talk about this spot as though it's like some war crime, some state secret that you can't speak about until a couple of days before, I think is costing you the ability to maybe find out about this guy in a fair and balanced and neutral environment. We'll see. The Cardinals could very well hold it against Liberatore that he didn't pitch that well on Monday and say they're going to go with another option or they're going to announce their starter in 3 days. But what I would do is I would come to the ballpark on Tuesday and say, Libby's going to start 5 days from now, and he's going to prepare this week like a starter, and he's going to be in that role for the time being. And if he's not, then move him to the bullpen as a fixture there, at least for now, and tell us who's going to be the starter that you're calling up from Memphis. Or because it's just, I don't think you're doing him or the team any favors to continue to play this out the way that the Cardinals are. I think it is 100% a mistake dating back to letting Steven Matz start in the first place against Detroit, where they knew he was compromised physically. That is a management move that, whether it's Ollie Marmol or the communication that should be happening with John Mozeliak and isn't, or if that communication happened with John Mozeliak and they decided still to go forth with Steven Matz, I think all around it's a mistake. And I hate to think that they are going on the same line of thinking, making mistakes with that spot in the rotation now with other players that they're dealing with. Tell Matthew Liberatore he's in the rotation. Tell him he's back in the bullpen. But trying to straddle the line is not fair to a guy that you're then going to turn around and punish and say, well, if he would perform better in the rotation, we would keep him there, but he just hasn't been consistent enough. I think to expect a consistent mentality from a guy like Liberatore when you have not consistently given him the runway to have some comfort in what his role looks like, it's just unreasonable expectations by the Cardinals. That's my opinion on it. We'll see what they do. My view would be, and I'm just going to go ahead and say, if they do it differently, that's okay. My view would be one of the two. You have to tell him, hey, you're in the bullpen. We like you there. Or, yes, we're going to continue to thread this out and allow you to start, but you're in the rotation and you're starting 5 days from your last turn. I think you have to do one of those two things. I would continue to start him. I would give him another look. I would put him back in the rotation. Tell him he's pitching this weekend at Busch Stadium. Tell him he's up to 70, 75 pitches to prepare to work up to that. Cardinals will be taking on the Red Sox. I think that would be I guess, Sunday's game. Do I expect the Cardinals to do that? No. I expect them to continue to manipulate the off days because they get one on Thursday, and that's maybe going to allow them to move Sonny Gray up a spot. Whatever it is that they're going to do, I feel like they're going to continue to manipulate. I think it would be better for everybody to go ahead and just honor the off day of the other starters. Don't overwork those guys. Those off days being baked in could be a benefit to everybody. And don't try and push it too much by just scrounging every off day and saying, oh, we can move up our starters. No, but say it in advance. Don't wait until later to decide. This will they, won't they? They're going to move it up. They're not going to move it up. It's been a little bit too herky-jerky for my liking. I would put Liberatore in the rotation. I would have already told him, or I'll tell him on Tuesday when he gets to the ballpark, that he's going to be starting on Sunday. Do I expect the Cardinals to handle it that way? Not necessarily. And I think if they don't handle it that way, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to move up a starter to where Liberatore's turn would then come next Monday or whatever it would be. And that could even be an understandable decision if you're going to look at the lineup differentials between Boston and I think the Orioles then come next. So you're going to try to measure out maybe which matchup could be more favorable for a lefty. Or they could say Liberatore's just going back to the bullpen in general, and we're going to see what that start is going to look like and who's going to fill it. And just go ahead and commit to bringing up somebody from AAA because you need to find out about some of these guys anyway before the offseason when a number of them are going to be Rule 5 eligible. I don't know what the reluctance is for the Cardinals to make a move. It's like they are terrified of making the wrong one, and I think that has been something that has hamstrung this team at times. Now, that's a lot of negative talk for a team that won a couple of games in a row as we record this podcast late on Monday night / Tuesday morning. And maybe Sonny Gray comes out on Tuesday, and our next podcast is talking about a 3-game winning streak for the Cardinals. Ideally, that would be the case for everybody involved, but I do feel like these matters still need to be discussed for a team that, as we record, is 7 games below 500 and still sitting in last place in the NL Central. There's certainly room for the Cardinals to move up. They gained some ground on some other NL Central teams that did lose today, but as we sit here, the Cardinals are tied. I should correct myself. They're tied for last. The Reds are 17-24 as well, and they have lost 9 of 10. So that's a team that I thought had a lot of upside coming into the year, but we've seen them now kind of go on their skid. The Pirates had theirs early as well. The Cubs and Brewers right now looking like the only two really capable teams in the division. I still think there's room for the Cardinals to bring that back and have a consideration for them to be in that conversation as well. But the day the Contreras injury happened to Wilson Contreras, I said that was the first day that I would pick against the Cardinals if you just asked me point blank, yes or no, are they a playoff team this year? As of that day, I would have said no. And then the Cardinals went on a run where they were losing a bunch of games in a row. We'll see. Maybe they sweep the Angels, and by the end of that series, maybe I'm singing a different tune. They'd be 19-24. They'd be, 5 games under 500, which is better than where they were a few days ago when they were, now they're 7 games under, so they were 9 games below. And you can also look up and say, look, there's no teams really running away with all the wild card spots. The Braves are a juggernaut, but the Phillies have been even better. So those are 2 playoff teams. The Brewers and Cubs right now are 2 playoff teams, and the Dodgers are going to win the NL West, which leaves at present the 3rd wild card spot in the National League would be the Padres at 22-22, Mike Schultz group. And the Cardinals behind that team in the standings they're 5 wins back, but they're only 2 losses back, 2 in the loss column. So that's 3.5 games back of a legitimate real life playoff spot right now for the Cardinals. So yeah, if they win a couple more in Los Angeles or Anaheim or whatever the hell they call that place, you may see me flip a little bit easier than others would, even with a team below 500. If this team starts demonstrating they can hit, and if they can do it in particular against opposing starters, I think they're going to be in the mix. I think certainly you sweep this series against the Angels, we can maybe calm down the talk about an organizational change and firing a manager and maybe even not believing that firing a hitting coach is going to be necessary. And I've seen some Cardinals fans make this commentary, and I couldn't disagree with it more, but that they hope for the team to lose because they're so convinced that change is needed that they want the Cardinals to lose so that the change can be expedited. That is twisted. Be a fan how you want to be a fan, but I also think there's enough talent on the team that if they could get on a little bit of a roll and they could get the vibes right, maybe they turn this around in shorter order than you could have possibly imagined as things were at their lowest over the weekend, Friday and Saturday. Let me know, Cardinals fans, what you think. Tell me in the comments section below, and make sure to hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of this video. as we'll do Cardinals content all season long on the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals writer channel. One announcement that I'll make at the end of this video, so not everybody's going to get to see it, but there are channel memberships now open on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@B-Schaeffer12. Lots of different perks. I'm only mentioning it in a cursory fashion so that I can send a DM to the people that had asked for it and say, hey, it's live. I'll throw a comment as well in the comments to this video on YouTube so people can see it, and I'll try to remember to mention it at the front end of tomorrow's video so that maybe we can get things going. There are 2 tiers. Basically, the first tier gets you all the good stuff that you want. The second tier has all of that. Plus, I am starting a Discord channel, and there will be a private group chat essentially in that Discord. Bear with me. If people do join this right away, I'll need to sort of figure out exactly how to set that up. But I think Discord might be the best place to house a private group chat that does include me talking Cardinals and whatever else all year long. I think that might be better than doing it on, say, Twitter, because sometimes the DMs on Twitter just doesn't work that good, and it might be easier to add and subtract people from a private Discord chat. So that's one of the elements. You can check out the price points. It's like $5, $10 a month. There is also the Spotify membership. If that's something that interests you, is subscribing over there. If all you care about is I just don't want to have ads on the podcast, Spotify is probably the way to go. If you want more of a group environment and a lot of cool perks, YouTube membership would be the way to go. But I'm always available at B-Schaeffer12. Send me a DM. Let me know what you think, what you'd like to see, and I'll continue to try to accommodate. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.